Welcome to another show of Health Matters, brought to you by WCCA TV and the Worcester District Medical Society. I'm Dr. Bruce Karlin, your host, and tonight it is my great honor and pleasure to have Dr. Robert Finberg, formerly Chief of Medicine at UMass, with credentials so long that we can take up the rest of the show giving them. Suffice it to say that he's one of the premier infectious disease expert, and tonight, welcome, and we're going to talk about all things COVID.
Great, thank you. It's good to be here.
Well, what got me interested in having you on the show was when we shared a couple of patients that had recently had COVID, and you said, boy, have I got a great study. Ultimately, we were able to get one of them on. I think this is in the tradition of great things that UMass has done. We have in our city one of the premier institutions of medicine with phenomenal studies going on, and we're able to afford our patients chances before they are out on the market. I thought we might start by just talking about that particular study.
Sure.
What have you got going there?
So we have a couple of different studies where we're looking at monoclonal antibodies to SARS-CoV-2, and these antibodies have been shown to eliminate virus when given early and to decrease hospitalizations. So it's very important to study them. We've started with Lilly studying 2 of their monoclones, and now there's a third one which seems to have even more efficacy against the new variants. So we're studying either a single versus a triple combination of monoclones, and we're looking at resolution of symptoms.
So monoclonal antibodies, we make these, and the monoclonal antibodies that you're studying are ones that are artificially put together by research companies?
Well, they vary. So actually, there are a couple of studies that we're doing. One of them, which is through Lilly, is actually antibodies that were isolated from a patient who recovered from COVID. And the first one that they isolated, which was called bamlanivimab, which is difficult to pronounce, was isolated from the patient, and recently they've isolated another one that they don't have a difficult to pronounce name yet for. But this second one, which was later in the patient's course, has, interestingly enough, more activity. So we are also, as part of a national trial with the National Institutes of Health, looking at a couple of other products by some different companies, as well as a polyclonal, preparation of different antibodies from people who have survived COVID. So it's a number of different things that are going on.
And obviously you can't break open the envelope just yet, but what's your sense of how these work?
Well, I think based on the experience, the published literature on these monoclones, both from Regeneron and particularly Lilly, they are effective in altering the course of the disease. It's clear that people don't end up in the hospital and they don't end up with severe disease. So we're quite excited about them. Now, whether the polyclonals, the ones that have multiple antibodies, will work better, we don't really know. And that's something that we're studying.
This is why people should, if you've got COVID and you're nervous about things, be part of a study. I was thinking, I have a number of patients that got on the early trials for the antibodies for treating rheumatoid arthritis.
Oh, right. Humira.
And they were, they have been getting their drugs for 20 years at no cost, and they've had no progression of disease.
Wow.
So
yeah,
they put themselves, they said, hi, I'm going to be a guinea pig, and they did it. Do you see much of a downside in your testing here? Do you think that Have you noticed any difficulties that the patients have had when they get these antibodies?
No, the antibodies are quite safe, and they've really been, we haven't seen any complications. The complications are extremely rare. I would mention that I was a volunteer. I volunteered for the Moderna vaccine study, and I'm happy that I did. And we are doing the...
So how long ago was that?
That was in the summer. I got my second vaccine in September.
So before it was approved?
Before it was approved. As I said, I was part of the study. It was a placebo-controlled study, but I certainly don't regret doing it. And we performed the Pfizer trial at UMass, and I think that we enrolled about 140 patients, and I think they were all pleased. And eventually what happened was half of them got placebo, but after the emergency use authorization, of course, they all got the vaccine. So
I would also point out that we've both been vaccinated, which is why we're
not wearing masks.
Why we're not wearing masks and talking to one another.
Yep.
So why don't you catch us up on some of the science of COVID?
Mm-hmm.
By the way, if somebody has had COVID and let's say they've been sent home,
mm-hmm.
how do they enroll in your study?
Okay, so they would contact, the easiest way probably is to go to the umassmed.edu website and look for clinical trials. There's the Conquering Disease page, and all of the trials will be listed there. And we're certainly doing a couple of them now. So,
any other good ones in the pipeline right now you want to share with us?
Yes, I'd be happy to. So we are looking at an oral drug called favipiravir. It's a drug that we have used for influenza, and that has activity against SARS-CoV-2. This is taken orally, and it's a 10-day course, and we are looking at that compared to placebo for people with mild disease, not people that are going to be hospitalized. So I think that's one that we're interested in. And as I said, there are 2 different monoclonal antibody trials that we're doing right now.
Now, are you doing anything with your patients with severe disease? Do you have some studies going there as well?
We do. We have 2 studies going on right now. One of them is called the Active-1 study. That's an NIH trial. And it uses immunomodulators like infliximab, for example, and CRC, both of which...
So infliximab is another one of these antibodies.
Right, antibodies.
And we know that it's safe because we use it in other diseases.
Exactly. And we also have another drug called CRC, which is another immunomodulator, also been used for other diseases, for rheumatoid arthritis in particular. So we're trying to see if these will be effective and perhaps less toxic than dexamethasone. Dexamethasone has been shown to enhance recovery in people with severe disease. And so has, in a trial that we participated in, so has baricitinib, which is a JAK kinase inhibitor. So we're looking at
those
others.
names just roll off your tongue, is it?
Right.
You need that long biography in order to speak in tongues here.
So yeah, we are trying a new drug, which is known by the popular name PTC-299, which is actually...
that one I could actually say,
right? Which has activity in vitro. It's been used for other diseases, including cytokine diseases. Again, it's an immunomodulator, and we're looking at that for hospitalized patients. So a number of different trials are going on.
So, Dr. Robert Finberg, being the expert that you are, you've shared with us a number of these trials. You've shown us how we can participate, and if a patient wanted to participate, they can talk to their doctor.
Talk to their doctor, and their doctor should contact us,
Yeah.
and we'd be happy to enroll them.
Do you want to tell us some things about COVID? How are we doing?
We're doing very well in Massachusetts. I mean, really, we are beginning to get to the point where we were last summer, where we really stopped seeing cases. We still see a few every day, and I'm hoping that that's going to continue to downslide. The curves show it coming down. So, and I think there are probably at least 2 factors that we know of. And I think the prominence of the vaccine, we've vaccinated over half of our people, is a big issue. Also, coronaviruses are seasonal. And to some degree, I think we're seeing less the way we did last summer. So I think.
Curious thing, have you noticed a drop in flu cases?
Well,
do you want to speak to that?
Yes, I'd be happy to speak to that. I'm a flu investigator, and this wasn't a good year for flu investigations. I can tell you that. So I think it's multiple things. Certainly, having the masks and the social distancing made a difference. But I would have to say the observation was that even in states like North Dakota, where they didn't do a lot of masking and social distancing, they didn't have very much flu either. So there may be multiple things about the ecology or the ecosystem of the viruses. And in pandemics, I think you get less of other viruses. I have to say I am concerned that next year will be a big flu season. I'm hoping that it will not be a big COVID season.
It just struck me now, is it conceivable that the work that we've done on COVID will change how we approach flu vaccines as well?
Yes, and several companies are working on that. And I think one of the things you can say about these new RNA vaccines is that they are much better than some of our previous vaccines.
So we were comfortable with flu vaccines that were 50% effective.
Correct.
And these are clearly 98% effective.
Yeah, and there are such vaccines being developed, and there are people, UMass and other places, working on this, and I'm very optimistic about that because these COVID vaccines are better than natural immunity, and as you know, natural immunity has kind of failed us for influenza. I mean, it's good. If you've had influenza before, you are much less likely to have a severe case again, but comes back every year. So I'm hoping that these new vaccines will be helpful.
A bunch of things about these mRNA vaccines. They are not grown in media that people would be allergic to.
That's true.
So they're basically grown in fat, is my understanding. And so that they're far less likely to have allergic reactions, but we're still seeing some. Yeah,
and they trigger the immune response, and the immune response, as you know from your patients with rheumatoid arthritis, is very variable in different people, and funny things can happen. Very few immune reactions.
Way less than.
I mean, there's a few cases of anaphylaxis, but you can practically count them on your hand. I mean, and yeah, it's not a protein vaccine; it's RNA, and RNA is a normal part of the cell. It's how our proteins are made, and it makes a protein, a viral protein, and of course some people may react to that.
So it causes the body to make
the
protein.
Yeah.
In other words, we're giving no proteins.
We're not injecting protein.
So you usually need a protein to start an immune response.
As a rule. Mm-hmm.
So the stuff, the fallout from this has got to be unbelievable and propelling medical knowledge.
Well, people have been working on RNA vaccines for a decade, but I think that now that there are a couple that have been very successful, I think you're going to see rapid progression. I think you're going to see, I know that Pfizer is working on a booster. I think Moderna is working on a booster. You're going to see a lot of activity in this area.
Everybody sort of says, well, COVID came in 2019. We had a vaccine a couple of months later, when in fact what you're telling us is that work was going on since the 2003 MERS.
Absolutely. I mean, RNA vaccines have been around. The concept has been around for a while. It just hadn't been marketed yet. But I believe, it's not a new concept. The developmental work was done over the last several years. However, I think it will explode now because I think a lot of companies have taken this on.
So we have right now 3 vaccines approved in the United States, Worldwide, I understand that there's a bunch of others.
Many. I mean, AstraZeneca, which is another, we have the two RNA vaccines, Moderna and Pfizer, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which is an adenovirus. The AstraZeneca vaccine is still waiting for approval for the FDA. It's another adenovirus. Novavax has a protein vaccine.
Explain it. Adenovirus just... you sort of hitchhike onto a...
So what happens is you insert the gene for the coronavirus, the spike protein, into the adenovirus.
So the spike protein is the thing that's causing all the trouble.
Well, the spike protein is the attachment protein for the virus. So without that protein, or if you make antibodies to that protein, then the virus can't enter the cell.
So when you make antibodies, they attach to the virus making the spike protein on the virus, and it's got no place to hook on. It has no place
to go. And, also, I mean, there's a lot of debate at the moment. It's quite interesting because I heard the chief medical officer for Pfizer say, well, neutralizing antibodies aren't important. Well, that was a big statement. I think it was a bit of an overstatement. But his argument was that you see protection after 2 weeks in both of these vaccines. The antibodies don't come up until about 3 weeks. So
something strange is happening.
Well, it could be T cells. It could be other things that are being stimulated, or it could be that it's just below the level of detection. There are a lot of explanations, but it is true that these vaccines also stimulate other immune responses, including T lymphocytes, which may be important. They kill infected cells, so maybe that's where it is.
It's unbelievable. So what you've shared with us so far is that the vaccines are ridiculously effective.
They're very effective.
That that if you get COVID, we've got some wonderful studies going on that work for people with mild COVID and with severe COVID. Can you talk to us a bit about the long COVID? I've had a couple of patients that have had a whole variety of symptoms. We get heart blocks, funny heart rhythms. We've got people with diarrhea that persists, and the case studies that I've seen show that that if after you've had COVID, you get the vaccine, that some of these long COVID symptoms seem to disappear. What does that mean?
Well, I don't know what that means. I will tell you, it's not obvious.
We've come to the guru, and now you're saying, right, I don't know.
To talk about long COVID, there's no doubt that a lot of people have symptoms that last for several months. And if you look at there's a Dutch study where they looked at people 8 months post-COVID, and a significant proportion, not the majority, fortunately, but a significant portion of them still have symptoms. Fatigue is the highest level. Obviously, people that lose their taste and smell, that can persist for weeks, not usually months, but that can...
My nephew had it for 11 months.
11 months, that's very unusual, but... Yeah, so we're just beginning to study so-called PASC, the post-acute COVIDs, and I have seen what you saw, that there's some people that say they get much better with the vaccine. That doesn't really make sense to me, because I think the virus is gone by the time they get the vaccine. I don't see why the vaccine would make them better, but there are a lot of things we don't understand, and that could be a modulation of the immune system. I mean, obviously, people that get severe COVID, it's because they make an immune response which is detrimental. Obviously, the lungs are usually the place where we get into the most trouble, and it's an exuberant response in the lungs that makes people die of COVID in general. So if you alter the balance of the immune system, perhaps that's the way it works.
So you're saying that there are multiple ways that the body provides immunity, and that maybe the ones that we have naturally aren't quite the same as the ones that we're helping you out with, which would be your antibodies that you're giving my patient that got on the study, that or getting the vaccine, which provides yet another.
Yeah, it's a different kind of response, and perhaps that's a better response than certain individuals might make in response to the virus.
So you're raising more questions than you're answering here.
Yeah. I must say there are a lot of unknowns about COVID, and as soon as you ask me whether it's coming back, I won't know the answer to that either. But we could talk about it.
And we'll probably have other iterations of other vaccines that.
Actually, I heard
other variants.
I've heard an interesting discussion about that. Dr. Fauci, I think. Took what most of us in academics was the right attitude, and he said after the two vaccine companies, Pfizer and Moderna, came out and said they were offering booster shots, Dr. Fauci said he thought public health people should determine whether there's a need for booster shots, and that isn't the way Pfizer and Moderna look at it. They figure it should be the consumer who determines whether there are booster shots.
Well, there's, not to get into the pharma politics, but our most successful vaccines, when you take a look at MMR and Hep B and meningitis shots, all were developed by Merck without public health. As a matter of fact, most people don't know Hillerman that made them all. And he never got recognized with a Nobel Prize or anything like that, but those are shots that we give now regularly.
Yep.
And so some of, and I'm not a huge big pharma fan, but they've been pretty spectacular at this, even though a lot of the research was done on NIH grants. I understand.
Yeah, I mean, I think the NIH has contributed a lot to the vaccine development, but I'm not taking it away from big pharma. Although in this case, I think you got to give credit to the government for Operation Warp Speed, because they put a tremendous amount of money into that, and a lot of it went to Moderna and Pfizer, and I certainly think it allowed the drugs to get to market much faster. So I think they both deserve credit. As I said, as you know, Moderna had been working on this. We have good friends at Moderna for the last decade, but it helped to get the government support.
So the first SARS-type virus wasn't that the MERS? And what was that?
The first one was SARS-1. That was in 2003.
And then the MERS came in like
MERS
2012.
Came after that.
Yeah.
And, it's very interesting. SARS-1, if you remember, started out
quit on its own
in Asia, right? And people were wearing masks, and then there was a big outbreak in Toronto, in Canada, and there were some outbreaks in other parts of the world. There were very few cases in the United States, and it died. When SARS-CoV-2, we don't know why. A lot of
that
people
started the research. Somebody said, this was killing people.
Yep.
Your common cold.
Yep.
All of a sudden becomes a fatal disease.
Actually, at UMass, we made, and I was part of that one, we made an antibody to SARS at the time. And actually, when SARS-CoV-2 came around at Mass Biologics, which is part of UMass, they pulled out that antibody and tried it. It wasn't quite as effective against SARS-CoV-2. So now they have some new antibodies that look very good, actually, and they're working on producing them. They're working on, this is at Mass Biologic, producing actually a nasal installation of an IgA antibody, which are very effective in surface.
So we just keep monkeying around.
We keep trying.
And you can keep the alphabet cooking there, and
we keep trying.
We try all these things. Do you think we'll ever be over this pandemic, or do you think this is going to be something that we have to deal with in some other way?
Well, I knew you were going to ask me this question. I told you already. I know the answer. All pandemics, and history is replete with pandemics dating back to the bubonic plague and prehistory, have ended. So I'm confident this one will end. Now, whether this virus will go away, I'm less confident about. And most human coronaviruses are actually seasonal, like flu. So one possibility, the pandemic will end. I'm confident of that. But that doesn't mean that this virus will entirely go away, and it may come back with a
You
variant.
still can get bubonic plague.
Well, that's true, and that's mostly in prairie dogs in the
Yeah,
United States.
you can get it.
You absolutely can.
You know, so
I'm less confident. I was more confident before we saw these variants and we saw these multiple waves that this would be like SARS-1, but we'll see. I think a possibility is that it would turn into a more of a seasonal virus that might have variants. And I think, the good news, again, and being in Massachusetts where we're highly vaccinated, is the vaccine seems to be effective against all the variants, at least so far. So anybody who's vaccinated can probably be confident, as you and I are, that they're not going to get the disease.
The other good news is that the research that we've done in these vaccines is likely to shorten the course of any new variant should it prove resistant.
Absolutely, and I think the hope is that it will also prevent the next pandemic, because there will be another pandemic, because history tells you that.
And it may be from some totally different virus.
Absolutely, but having the technology now to respond to that very quickly, I'm hoping will change the future. The good news is, I think the greatest, we could argue about this, but from my perspective, the greatest advance that medicine ever made was the smallpox vaccine. We actually eliminated a virus which killed hundreds of millions of people, just in the 20th century. That, I think, was the single biggest advance. So now we're on the brink of a new vaccine technology. It's a great time in many ways.
Believe it or not, we have filled up the allotted time. And I've got to thank you immensely, Dr. Robert Finberg, professor of medicine at UMass and infectious disease and internal medicine, former chair of the department, and just a wonderful expert that's graced us with your knowledge. We'll have to have you back again when you show us the results of all of your studies. And in the meantime, what was how do you get, if you've had COVID and you want to get on the trial, what's the...
You just go to the umassmed.edu website and look under clinical trials or concrete disease. Would be probably the best way to do it.
Well, that's fabulous. That's another session of Health Matters brought to you by WCCA TV and the Worcester District Medical Society. Stay safe. So that's that.